For the longest time, the story around Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker felt complete. Not because everything was explained, but because nothing was. There were no dramatic interviews, no late-night posts, no emotional statements clearing the air. Just a quiet shift that everyone was expected to accept and move on from. And most people did, until Kandi Burruss spoke. Not loudly, not emotionally, not with accusations or answers. She spoke in pauses, in what she didn't clarify, in the way certain sentences stopped halfway, in how she described feelings instead of events. And that's where the discomfort started. Because when someone has the chance to explain everything and chooses not to, it forces one unsettling question into the room. What are they protecting? Kandi didn't expose a secret. She didn't confirm a rumor. She didn't name a villain. But after she spoke, the silence around Todd Tucker felt heavier. Not louder, not hostile, just present. Like something unresolved had been sitting there for years, untouched. And suddenly, the calm way this marriage ended didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt controlled, carefully contained, almost rehearsed. So now the story isn't about what happened. It's about what was never addressed. And that leaves us asking the question no one seems willing to answer. Was this silence about privacy, or about something that was never meant to be discussed at all? For a long time, Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker were presented as one of those rare reality TV relationships that actually worked. Not loud, not chaotic, not built on spectacle. Their story felt grounded in something sturdier than romance alone: business alignment, shared ambition, and mutual respect. Kandi had already built her legacy before the relationship ever began. Music, entrepreneurship, consistency. She wasn't searching for validation or rescue. Todd entered the picture with a different kind of energy. Less expressive, more structured. Practical. Focused. Someone who saw stability as a system rather than a feeling. From the outside, it looked like balance. And for years, that's how it was framed. Interviews emphasized teamwork. Appearances highlighted unity. Even disagreements were presented as healthy differences, normal friction between two strong personalities navigating success together. But the first thing that stands out now, in hindsight, is how carefully controlled everything appeared to be. Not fake, not performative, just managed. There was never an overshare culture around their marriage. Personal matters rarely spilled into public spaces. Emotional language stayed measured. If there were problems, they didn't leak loudly. They stayed inside the walls. At the time, that discretion was praised. It was seen as maturity. But discretion and suppression can look identical from the outside. As the years passed, subtle patterns began to form. Not scandals, not arguments, just shifts in presence and tone. Family conversations sounded less aligned than before. Parenting philosophies appeared noticeably different, not incompatible, but distinctly divided. One perspective leaned toward comfort and reassurance. The other emphasized resilience, limitation, and preparation. Neither approach was presented as wrong, but they were rarely shown merging into a single voice. That divide didn't attract attention initially because it wasn't dramatic. But when parenting styles don't intersect, children feel it first. And that's where Kandi Burruss's later reflections quietly change how people revisit the early years. Kandi grew up in a household that many believed they understood because it was visible. Reality television creates that illusion, as if proximity equals access. But visibility doesn't mean transparency. What gets shown is curated by tone, timing, and control. And control, in itself, isn't necessarily harmful. But it does shape narrative. As Kandi got older, viewers noticed something subtle but consistent. She often spoke with an awareness beyond her age. There was a seriousness in how she processed family dynamics, even when she wasn't naming them. Again, nothing alarming, just notable. Meanwhile, public appearances involving Todd began to shift slightly. He appeared less emotionally expressive, more reserved. Calm, corporate, even. His language around family leaned toward structure, expectations, outcomes, lessons. That didn't raise alarms at the time. Many people respected it. Some even preferred it. But what people didn't question then was whether that calm masked internal distance, or whether it was simply how he navigated pressure. Public behavior matters not because it reveals intent, but because it sets patterns. And the pattern that began forming was this: emotional moments were handled with logic. Conflict was managed quietly. Discomfort didn't escalate, it dissolved. Over time, togetherness looked less like connection and more like coordination. When rumors of strain finally began surfacing, they didn't arrive with shock. They arrived with recognition. Fans didn't say, "No way." They said, "That makes sense," which is often more telling than denial. The separation itself reinforced that feeling. There was no fallout, no public processing, no visible grieving, just acknowledgement and movement forward, almost as if the ending had been emotionally rehearsed long before it became official. And that's the part that people began revisiting only after Riley spoke. Not because she accused anyone, she didn't, but because she described an environment where emotional clarity wasn't prioritized, where conversations resolved outcomes without always resolving feelings. Again, that doesn't equal wrongdoing. Many households operate that way. Many parents believe structure is love. Many children don't question it until adulthood. The significance lies in the consistency. Riley didn't describe a moment where everything broke. She described a gradual mismatch between how love was intended and how it was received. Looking back, fans began to notice timing more carefully. Key moments where Todd appeared less present emotionally. Interviews where questions about family were answered efficiently rather than personally. Interactions that felt formal rather than warm. Nothing incriminating, just distant. And distance doesn't accuse. It signals. The public narrative at the time framed everything as mutual understanding, busy schedules, and natural evolution. That explanation still stands. It may even be accurate. But Riley's later words added dimension. Not contradiction, dimension. She didn't say the story was false. She suggested it was incomplete. And sometimes incompleteness is where tension hides. At this stage of the story, there is still no exposure. No secret revealed. No allegation made. Only a realization that what looked stable may have been emotional parallel living rather than connection. Two adults functioning efficiently, but not necessarily processing things the same way. That doesn't mean anyone failed. It means something didn't align. And alignment issues don't scream. They separate quietly. Which brings us to the moment where silence began to feel heavier, not because it was defensive, but because it was uninterrupted. And once Riley broke that silence emotionally, not factually, people began listening differently to the quiet that came before it. Not to accuse, but to understand what the calm might have been covering. What shifted the story wasn't a new interview or a breaking headline. It was the audience. After Riley began speaking more openly about her experience, not in a dramatic reveal, but in fragments, the way people consumed old material changed. Suddenly, past moments didn't feel neutral anymore. They felt unfinished. Viewers started revisiting interviews that had once passed without notice. The tone became the focus more than the words. Short pauses were replayed. Slight hesitations were highlighted. Moments where questions were answered efficiently but not emotionally were no longer dismissed as personality traits. They were noticed. And noticing is usually where narratives begin. It's important to say this clearly: no single interview exposed anything. No statement contradicted another. No receipts surfaced. What emerged instead was pattern recognition. And patterns don't accuse, they suggest. Todd Tucker's public presence became a subject of interpretation. Not criticism, not blame, but observation. The way he spoke about family leaned toward responsibility and structure. His language rarely drifted into emotional reflection. When questions moved toward personal connection, answers remained composed, even distant. That doesn't mean something was hidden. Many people communicate that way naturally, especially those wired to think in systems rather than emotions. But once Riley described feeling unheard at times, audiences began recontextualizing those traits through her lens. And lenses matter. Silence from Todd and Kandi following Riley's comments became part of that lens. Not suspicious by default, but notable. Public figures often choose not to respond to family commentary to avoid escalation or misinterpretation. Staying quiet can be the most responsible response. But in the space of gossip culture, silence doesn't stay neutral for long. Online conversations grew quietly at first. People didn't rush to conclusions. They asked questions instead. Why doesn't anyone correct the emotional framing? Why isn't there even gentle disagreement? Why let the interpretation stand unchallenged? Those questions didn't come from hostility. They came from curiosity. And curiosity, once activated, doesn't need confirmation to grow. This is where speculation began, not as rumor, but as emotional guesswork. People weren't theorizing about secrets or scandals. They were speculating about dynamics. Was the household more structured than nurturing? Did emotional conversations get resolved or postponed? Did discipline sometimes replace dialogue? No proof was offered. No sources quoted. Just personal reactions layered onto public behavior. And that's why this narrative stuck. Because it didn't feel like gossip fed to people. It felt like something people arrived at on their own. The most compelling detail wasn't anything Riley said explicitly. It was how careful she was not to say too much. She didn't frame herself as a victim. She didn't dramatize pain. She didn't demand validation. She spoke like someone trying to make sense of feelings after they had already settled. That calmness unsettled audiences more than anger would have. Anger invites debate. Calm invites reflection. As reaction videos and discussions grew, body language became a focal point. Not in a forensic way, but emotionally. Fans compared how Todd and Kandi appeared together in later years versus earlier ones. Less proximity. Less shared rhythm. More formality. Again, none of this proves wrongdoing. Relationships naturally change over time. Emotional expression shifts. Stress alters behavior. But when paired with Riley's reflections, those shifts felt heavier. What people responded to wasn't proof, it was coherence. The pieces didn't contradict each other. They aligned. And alignment creates stories. That's also where the internet's role complicates everything. Once an idea feels plausible, content multiplies around it. Not maliciously, algorithmically. One interpretation becomes 10. 10 become a narrative. Still, most discussions avoided accusations. That restraint is important. People weren't asking, "What did Todd do?" They were asking, "Why does this emotional picture feel incomplete?" And that difference matters. What made this situation emotionally sticky was identification. Many viewers saw their own family dynamics reflected in Riley's words. Parents who provided structure but struggled with emotional presence. Homes that functioned well on paper but felt cold in moments that needed warmth. For those viewers, this wasn't celebrity gossip. It was recognition. When that happens, silence becomes symbolism. Todd and Kandi's decision not to elaborate publicly was interpreted, fairly or not, as confirmation of complexity. Not guilt, not innocence. Complexity. And complexity resists resolution. Some fans defended the silence, arguing correctly that families deserve privacy. Others argued that since the family had shared their lives publicly for years, the emotional aftermath felt too carefully edited. Both interpretations can exist at once. That's what keeps the tension alive. Because nothing is being exposed, but something feels unresolved. And unresolved stories have weight. By this point, the narrative had evolved beyond divorce. It wasn't about who left whom or why. It was about emotional frameworks, how love is expressed, how authority is exercised, how silence is used. And Riley's voice sat in the middle of it, not pushing, not retracting, just existing. Which left everyone else doing the rest. The longer the silence continued, the more it became part of the story, not as evidence, but as atmosphere. An atmosphere is powerful. Because once people feel something, they don't need conclusions. They just need space to sit with the discomfort. And that's where this story paused. Not with answers, but with a quiet tension that refused to go away. At this point in the narrative, something important happens. The focus quietly shifts again. It moves away from events, timelines, and explanations, and settles into something far more uncomfortable: interpretation. Because when clarity is missing, the human mind fills in gaps whether it's invited to or not. And silence is the biggest gap of all. Psychologically, silence is rarely neutral. It doesn't just mean nothing. It often becomes a canvas where fear, curiosity, empathy, and suspicion all compete. Especially in public stories where people are used to access, updates, and narratives being managed in real time. When Riley spoke, she didn't accuse, she reflected. But reflection carries emotional truth, even when it avoids factual claims. And emotional truth, once shared, demands response or containment. The response, in this case, was absence. That absence wasn't aggressive. It wasn't defensive. It was composed. And composition itself can feel unsettling when emotions are involved. Because the more controlled the silence feels, the more people wonder what it's containing. This is how suspicion forms, not from evidence, but from imbalance. If one side offers emotional vulnerability and the other offers restraint, the audience doesn't assume innocence or guilt. They assume asymmetry, and asymmetry creates tension. But here's where the story deserves nuance. Silence doesn't always mean avoidance. Sometimes it means protection. Parents may choose not to publicly counter a child's emotional experience, even if they see it differently. Public disagreement in those moments can deepen harm. Staying quiet can be an act of restraint rather than strategy. There's also the reality that public figures understand something very clearly. Once words are released, they can't be contained. Silence can be the only way to prevent private family pain from becoming permanent public narrative. That possibility matters. So does complexity. Families rarely operate with clean moral roles. One person's discipline is another person's emotional distance. One person's structure is another person's silence. People can act with good intentions and still leave emotional impact they never fully recognize. None of that makes anyone a villain. It simply makes the situation unresolved. Optics, however, don't care about intention. From the outside, the contrast was striking. Riley spoke with emotional specificity but careful restraint. Todd and Kandi offered no emotional framing in return. Not denial, not alignment, just continued composure. And audiences don't analyze facts first, they analyze feeling. That's why this story refuses to settle. Because facts would end it. Optics keep it alive. The internet isn't responding to what's proven. It's responding to what feels unfinished. And unfinished stories behave strangely. They don't explode. They linger. They resurface in old clips. In remembered tones. In phrases that sounded normal before but heavier now. Viewers don't rewatch moments looking for guilt. They rewatch looking for confirmation of mood. Was that warmth? Was that distance? Was that avoidance or just personality? Those questions have no objective answers. And that's exactly why they persist. Another layer often overlooked is timing. Riley didn't speak in the heat of conflict. She spoke after distance had already formed. That timing suggests processing, not reaction. Reflection, not retaliation. And reflection makes audiences listen differently. Because when someone waits, people assume they've thought deeply. But reflection also carries the risk of reinterpretation. Memory is not static. It evolves. Experiences gain new meaning as relationships change. That doesn't make them false, it makes them human. The danger arises when audiences mistake personal emotional truth for universal narrative truth. Riley never claimed her view was complete. She never said hers was the only reality inside that household. But in the absence of alternative emotional accounts, her voice became the emotional center. And centers attract gravity. So where does that leave us? It leaves us here, with a story shaped more by silence than speech. A narrative built not on revelation, but on resonance. People aren't responding because they know what happened. They are responding because they recognize how it might feel. That doesn't justify suspicion, but it explains it. And this is where responsible storytelling matters. Because the truth is, silence has many meanings. It can be protection. It can be exhaustion. It can be refusal to perform. Or it can simply be the only option left when words would cause more harm than clarity. All of those explanations can exist at the same time. The internet, however, prefers singular answers. Real life rarely offers them. Riley's choice to speak, calmly, carefully, without accusation, didn't expose a scandal. It exposed a gap between public harmony and private experience. And that gap unsettled people not because it proved something dark, but because it resisted resolution. There is no clear villain in this story. No confirmed wrongdoing. No moment where everything snapped. There is only a family that changed, quietly, and a daughter who decided not to protect the illusion any longer, even if she didn't tear it down either. That restraint matters. And the restraint from the other side matters too. What we're left with isn't a mystery to solve. It's a tension to sit with. Because some truths don't arrive as facts. They arrive as feelings that don't fade. And some stories don't end when people stop talking. They end when everyone accepts that silence itself has become the final chapter. Not because it hides the truth, but because the truth no longer fits into language meant for public consumption. So the narrative remains open by design. Not because someone is guilty, not because someone is innocent, but because families are complex, memory is subjective, and silence, once noticed, can never be unheard. And that's where this story stays. Unfinished. Not exposed. Just heavy enough to follow you after the video ends. Now I want to pause the story here and talk directly to you. This isn't one of those stories where the goal is to decide who was right or who was wrong. It's not about choosing sides, assigning blame, or turning a family's complexity into a verdict. If anything, it's about recognizing how often real life refuses to give us clean endings. So I want to ask you, calmly, honestly, when someone finally shares how something felt, should that always be met with explanation? Or is silence sometimes the only response that doesn't cause more damage? Do you believe silence automatically means avoidance? Or can it also be a form of protection, especially when children, history, and long-term relationships are involved? And here's the harder one. Is it possible for multiple emotional truths to exist at the same time, even when they don't align? These aren't questions with quick answers, and that's intentional. If you have a perspective, whether you agree, disagree, or simply see shades of gray, I invite you to share it in the comments. Respectful discussion matters here, because stories like this don't belong to one interpretation alone. If you appreciate content that doesn't chase shock, that doesn't rush to judgment, and that leaves room for complexity, consider liking this video. It helps more thoughtful conversations reach people who are also willing to sit with uncomfortable nuance. And if you want to stay with stories that unfold quietly, through patterns, silence, and what isn't said, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications. Because not every truth arrives loudly. Some stay unfinished. And sometimes, silence isn't the end of the story. It's the part that stays with you the longest.